my friends. All right, so we have arrived at the module on recovery. And getting to this point has been challenging, has been laced with some comic relief, but more importantly, it's been made possible because of all of your support and your attendance. I want to give all of you who are still here, and so many of you, a big round of applause for joining and making sure that this event and this defense goes smoothly as it has so far. Please join me in giving everybody a round of applause. I also want to thank all of the advisors. Very quickly, if I can just take a minute out of character. What all of you don't see is that there is a very active and manic Slack channel that's running. And the gentleman to right in front of me, Vivek, was the one who, from Calgary actually, started to get us talking in that group, and it became a space of internal chatter. I will tell you this, a lot of folks have come and asked me, is this entirely scripted? And I can tell you, nobody here even saw what we had realized in the tactic of shorting. We didn't see that even coming. It just happened. Reading the room, figuring out trends, understanding different TTPs. This organic nature of running this is extremely challenging, but these advisors, all of you have been phenomenal in making this happen, so thank you for all of your efforts. And none of this would happen if we didn't have the amazing support of not just the attendees, the local community, the advisors, but also our sponsors, who play a critical part in our cybersecurity ecosystem. To my left, we have Anand Guruprasad from Cloudflare. Thank you, Anand and Team Cloudflare, for your continued support. I see Jillian there smiling away. Jillian, if you want to take the seat, you can. We'll assign you the crisis comms role. And you have a nice partner there to work with who might be going to jail very soon, but that's a separate topic. And Vivek, yes, you can make a citizen's arrest if so you choose. He's sitting to the right of you. And then we have a face very well known to all of you. She's now with Optiv, Lena Dabbitt. Thank you, Lena, for joining us as well, and thank you, Optiv, for all of your support. I believe some folks may also have gone to the workshop upstairs, and I will also tell you that towards the end of this module on the live chat, we will share the coupon from Immersive Labs, so you can practice some of these labs in real time. To our online audience, welcome as well. As always, this module will go on till approximately 3:45, 3:50-ish, at which point we'll take a very short break for about 8 to 10 minutes, and then come to the concluding lessons learned. I do want to tell everyone that in the lessons learned module, I'm more than happy to flip it. And if all of you want to take on roles from there and ask questions and interrogate these advisors, then go for it, have fun with it. We keep it to about 30 minutes, but if needed, we can go a little bit longer. But we hope to end by approximately 4:30, 4:45-ish, and then take a nice picture at the back over here. And I encourage all of you to participate in that. With that, bless you. With that, welcome to the recovery module. Bless you again. The acoustics in this room are mad proper. So, what is recovery all about? Recovery. You fall 7 times only to stand up 8, and then take a victory selfie after that. But with that, I will tell you this much, that in this module, yes, the focus is on recovery, but there's a lot of issues with, did we actually eradicate this threat? And did we actually understand what happened to our environment? I don't want to go to the media report yet, but Anand, I think you wanted a little bit of a debrief in terms of, did we actually eradicate this and are we ready for recovery? So Anand, I'll turn it over to you first, and you can unmute by pressing that button. Target your questions at that man with the lovely hair there.
Good afternoon. I must say that I've been following you guys on Wall Street Bets, and I'm seeing all the shorting that's going on. So, yeah, you guys are making the front page of Reddit right now. Having said that, I've been brought in now because my predecessor was fired unceremoniously, and I've been brought in to basically figure out what's going on. So a few things I want to set straight before we jump in. We've seen historically, we still are trying to figure out what's happened here. We know you're a critical infrastructure resource at this point, considering that dollar value up there and all the groceries that are being impacted. Have you looked at angles around how nation-state attacks are basically leading to critical infrastructure downtime? Do you know how are your partners and your supply chain management vendors connecting into your infrastructure? Do you know about footprint of how your both legitimate users and non-legitimate users leaving footprints in your infrastructure? Do you have visibility into all of that? Yeah, so if you can sort of give me a lay of land on what's worked so far, how have we contained the blast radius?
All right, well, welcome. We've stepped into the thick of it. So siberX Mart is a grocer. It also is a food distributor in the wholesale side. So their focus generally is to make sure that there is food in the grocery stores and that there's food to their wholesale customers, and that can be hospitals, old folks' homes, and the like, as well as FIFA this round. So generally, their focus is on that part of the business, and they likely see IT as more of a cost center and have probably, underfunded certain aspects to make a real robust organization. That said, we do have logs, we have a SIM, maybe tuned, maybe not. And what we have done right now is we're very confident that we've contained the threat, meaning of all our impacted systems. They are isolated. We are now rebuilding them. We did that in the last phase. And we're leveraging the tools we have, as well as any EDR capabilities, to keep an eye to see if there is any persistence. That can be phone homes, that can be lateral movement, et cetera. Now, again, that is a challenge, right? It's a needle in a stack of needles to find what bad looks like. What bad looks like can be quite hard to find, particularly if you have a signal-to-noise ratio problem. But the team is definitely focused on keeping an eye on that while we're supporting the business. Now, the business is very, very eager to get back online. There's obviously the executive pressure, there's the board pressure, but there's also the financial pressure where we had an earnings call. The company's already been under pressure because of this failed digital transformation project, and this was the earnings call about it being turned around. And unfortunately, it was a U-turn, not what we had hoped. So that's where we're at with that. So from a nation-state perspective, we are, the security operations centers leveraging their threat intelligence feeds. They're using Google News. They're trying to understand as much as they can. It is suspicious that it's not ransomware, because, I don't know, isn't that what we all do these days, is get ransomed? So the fact that we now see that our systems were pretty much just bricked and nothing more, does seem like there was some data theft. They did have access to our loyalty membership program, and it was actually noted that there was a bit of a psych quest, like how did they get access to that? And it turns out that it looked like marketing had taken a copy of that database for other marketing purposes, and potentially that is how the data was exfiltrated. Still determining that. On the supply chain side, this is the thing that we really do need to recognize, is that a grocery store is the epitome of supply chain. It has hundreds of suppliers that may have had to stop sending goods to all the stores across Canada because of this outage. As mentioned a few modules ago, you get the problem where if your warehouse can't receive the goods, they sit in trucks. And if it's food that is refrigerated, great, until the refrigeration system fails, runs out of gas in the truck. And now what we have to deal with is the opposite, that we now need to restart that supply chain. And we've got some experts from the actual industry that can probably provide much better depth and breadth on some of those challenges. And then lastly, on the forensics piece, we do want to have an understanding of root cause. And generally, everyone wants to solve the murder mystery while they still don't really understand what's going on. And really distracting from that whole idea of bringing the business back online. But now that we are in recovery mode, ideally the technical systems are either restored or being restored. it allows us to run tasks in parallel to get a better understanding. Grocery stores don't consider themselves critical infrastructure until they are. And whether they had in their plan to have forensic retention of data, chain of custody, is a good question, because a lot of these organizations don't realize they need that until they need it. And given the economic impact to Canada, I'm sure CCCS would want to have a better review, and RCMP would want to have a better review of what's going on. So I think that's a pretty good update. I think what we need to do now, we're in recovery. So that is the business. So it's very much less about pressing restore backup and more about a lot of the other moving pieces of getting a business that had to be halted back up and operational. And there's a people, process, and snacks problem there.
People, process, and snacks. Well, adding to this conversation is Lena. Lena, over to you.
Thank you. Actually, I have a couple of points that I just want to bring up based on both of your points. So number one, we went straight to nation-state actor, and that we have to be so careful about how we attribute if we don't yet have all the information, because it may very well be a nation-state actor, but it also may be a domestic actor, it may be an organized crime group, it may be a group like Scattered Spider. And simply because there's not a ransomware component doesn't mean that the data itself wasn't the target. And I'm not saying ransomware is going away, but current trends are showing that a lot of threat actors are just going in and taking the data. Now, in this instance, they did brick it up, but it still doesn't take the fact that the data itself it's a commodity, let's be clear. So that's the only thing I would caution. The other side of that too is it's such I view it as an outdated way of thinking where we put everybody into a silo where nation state is here and domestic is here and hacktivists are here and criminals who are really bad criminals, but they could pay a subscription fee because everything's democratized in cybercrime now. They're in another silo. This isn't that world anymore. And so what you'll find is, in this particular instance, regardless of who was the actor, there's a very good chance that someone else saw that, took advantage of it. So in the midst of the chaos, someone else is piggybacking in, or they're working together collaboratively from the start. But my whole caveat on this is just be cautious of how we view it, because oftentimes it is so much more than what we are looking at in the first instance.
Fair enough. I think at this point we do have an update from ODTN News, and before we go to that update, I'll just remind everyone, ODTN.news is this fictitious site where you can see this journey. And I've had a couple of direct questions about, we saw what happened in Ottawa, we saw what happened in Calgary. Could this be the same group, or is there some sort of domestic nefarious activity that's taking place where different actors are engaged with each other? So to get more on that, I bring your attention to the next media release from ODTN.
Good evening, I'm Roshan Khan, and this is ODTN News. After days of disruption, siberX says progress is finally being made. A company spokesperson confirmed that systems are gradually coming back online, with partial operations resuming in several regions and full restoration expected in stages. Officials call the recovery steady but cautious, noting that efforts are being coordinated with national cybersecurity partners and law enforcement. The company reaffirmed its focus on customer protection and restoring normal service as quickly as possible. The Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity says the incident bears similarities to attacks by Scattered Spider, a cybercrime group linked to major global intrusions, part of what officials describe as a broader campaign against Canadian infrastructure. The impact has extended beyond retail. Sources tell ODTN News that siberX wholesale division, which supplies a caterer for the upcoming FIFA events in Canada, briefly disrupted food deliveries before stabilizing operations, underscoring how deeply connected Canada's supply chains have become. Analysts say the company's upcoming earnings call will likely reflect tens of millions in losses. But today's message from siberX was cautiously optimistic, emphasizing containment, recovery, and renewed collaboration with federal agencies. For ODTN News, I'm Roshan Khan. Thank you for following along.
Well, it's late on day 4. Roshan Khan definitely looked happier on that video, and clearly she was able to get her groceries as well and eat. But this is a very interesting moment that we find ourselves in. There has been a release of potentially what has happened. Attribution is sort of, to some extent, loose extent being made as well. Vivek, if I can turn to you very quickly on this from a board's perspective, we're seeing at least 3 lines of discussion here. First is recovering the systems itself. 2 is dealing with this issue on the earnings call. The CFO is staring at me and hasn't blinked for the last 5 minutes. I am very, very nervous. But then the third part of it also is nobody wants this to happen again. Can you guide us? And I know maybe slightly out of character, but for the next minute or 2, can you guide us with where do we need to take this conversation right now?
So immediately after an incident like this, any earnings call or board update is going to say we're assessing the situation. So they would have a solid quarter, and we can look to precedents in Canada, with the recent Empire quarterly reports as an example. They would never be under the gun. Like my friend would never be under the gun to explain it all right now, because we wouldn't even know the full cyber story, wouldn't even know the full impact. The TCO, the total cost of ownership of an incident like this, is really over 5 years. By the time you factor in all of the work and audit churn and regulatory scrutiny that's going to follow this, it's hard to assess that quick. But I think there would be an expectation from boards and shareholders that you've got the right people involved and you are assessing it. So it's not just like we're going to do it, but we actually have a plan, we've got dates, we've involved credible independent third parties. And I think there was a bit of discussion earlier about, can we bring in help? And I was having a little bit of fun with you, but it actually would be a condition of our insurance coverage to be pulling in third-party independent forensic help, not just to help with the containment, the eradication, but also to be an independent voice. And that would come off an approved list appended to the policy. So that would have happened. So we'd have that voice in action. It might take months to figure it all out. We have the financial forensics in action. I think there's a whole work stream around data quality, because not only do we have to clean up the data in the ERP systems, the inventory counts in the stores, like for sure some of the trucks would have unloaded, some of the stuff would have been moved manually, and not that somebody has to open every box, there's barcodes on things so people can scan and catch up. There'd be a huge effort to get that data quality up to par. So that's in parallel happening. I think there's a lot of communication and brand repair happening in parallel as well, maybe, to ensure loyalty of the customers, what kind of offers would be offered. I think there also had to be a bit of story, like, hey, what did the grocer do? Like, by prioritizing communities that had limited options, there's a way to kind of spell out that story, by airlifting in, there's a telecom company I know when communities were hit, they were actually airlifting in water bottles, so there's a whole bunch of those things that even without the C-suite asking, there's just good people in the company, they're going to be doing all those, so collecting all those stories and building a communication package. And then there's also an employee recovery phase as well, because you're going to need to now figure out who's burnt out, who lost their weekends, how do we pay them back for the overtime or time in lieu, and put in something that will be sustainable, be fair, and lead to minimal mental stress and disruption. So there's going to be that. Then there's going to be whole communicate with suppliers as well, because some of them are going to be impacted depending on the contracts and the terms of the agreement. So that whole communication thing has to be spun up. So you're going to have the whole company kind of putting major change initiatives on hold to try to deal with this cleanup, and there's going to have to be probably some C-suite board level discussions on the key critical investments that were happening for the company to transform it into the future. Which of those still need to go? Probably because you don't want to put the brakes on things like AI. There's major hardware coming in, like robotics. You don't want to put the brakes on that. But there might be other things where we say, we can defer this or defer that and try to get the cleanup done as well. Many companies have gone through this incident and have come out better at the end. Their brand better, their customer relationship stronger, their employees more loyal if they maintain that transparency. And we talked earlier about the frequency of communication is so important, and giving people a place to call. Customers need a place to call. Employees need a place to call. And I think what's changed, though, if I can add a bit of newness to this, is what I'm saying is probably in everyone's playbook, right? But what's new now is AI can generate such compelling deepfakes that an incident like this happening on a national scale is going to be sprinkled with YouTube clips, TikTok clips that are AI generated. And it's really because we have citizens that don't get their news from Walter Cronkite anymore, right? It's not trusted sources. It might even be just like a 6-person panel on CNN. So they're getting it on WhatsApp, they're getting it on TikTok, they're getting it on YouTube. So that's another dimension I think we will face if this happened right now. And imagine that layer of confusion to our suppliers, to our employees. They don't know if they should come in, they don't know what they should be doing, and we'd have to be dealing with this misinformation campaign, some intentional by the threat actors, some intentional by tangential threat actors that believe in civil unrest in our country, and then some of it could be just people having a good time, right, and making jokes. So that's going to be another thing to manage, in situations like this. So I think I called out about 8 things in parallel happening there, but anyways, I'll stop there.
Oh, fair enough. Lena, go ahead.
Yeah, that's excellent, and I cannot stress enough the importance that people understand the role of disinformation and misinformation and the intersection with cybersecurity, because that is significant and actually presents one of our biggest threats. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but you absolutely hit the nail on the head. The only other thing I was going to add to that is Scattered Spider, in particular, will go after a sector. So what a sector. Can you tell I was just at sector? So if you look at the way Scattered Spider operates, they are very, very good as a group. They are highly intelligent. They will take one sector and they will focus very, very heavily on it, on its vulnerabilities, everything around it, and then you will see them operate in tandem to take it down. The other part of, sort of preparing and building is, how is siberX working with their competitors? How are you notifying them? Are you letting them know? Are you sharing how the compromise occurred? And if it is, and we all know how interconnected that supply chain is, if it is a commonality throughout other vendors like siberX, the likelihood is they're going to be compromised in very short order too. So I view it as a public service that siberX should be going in there and alerting their colleagues.
Yeah, and Michael, who was our incident response lead, has gone home to sleep. I see him in the crowd there. In the last message that he sent us, he says APT stands for Advanced Persistent Teenagers. But they have absolutely brought us a lot of ruckus. Well, Vivek and Lena, thank you for what you shared now. Again, Alex, probably, and Shrey, maybe for the next Operation Defender, wouldn't this be a perfect time for the internet to go dark across siberXmart's constituents? And then you don't have any misinformation campaigns to deal with. But with that said, I'm going to go to Sabino from a public information perspective. What are you putting out there before, Shrey, I turn it to you because I know Anand especially wants to hear a little bit more about what your reports are and what the state of the systems are. So Sabino, I'll give you the floor for 2 minutes. From a comms perspective, what's our first step in recovery?
Well, right now we're in the day 4 news counterframe cycle.
Yep.
We're following all of the social and commercial news stories about us. And where such stories deviate from the actual facts of the frames, we publish a counterframe. So we just published a counterframe that succeeded the ODTN broadcast. Following media coverage regarding recent systems interruptions, siberXmart confirms, and then we confirm what was reported. And then we provide additional status slightly above what is reported so that there is context around what is reported, followed by a press-only set of bullets called the operational recovery underway that they can use to litter their personal stories whenever they write the stories about what's happening. So we try to control the frame by confirming it, steering it, and then instrumenting it downstream so that other press can use our language when describing the nature of the incident.
The CEO remains quite irate that you have not asked her to be at the front of all communications. Is that still your position, that the CEO will not be fielding any direct questions or making any statements?
That is correct. This is an operational recovery at this point. Once the operations has completed and we apprise the CEO, then the CEO will be available for comment. Thank you. No more questions.
I can still ask you more questions. The public demands to know. Well, at this point, thank you for that
right, cool.
very succinct plan and notes put together. But yes, a very important point is for future Operation Defend the Nords in real time, we would also be able to show your notes up there on the screen, which will allow for an even more dynamic engagement. So thank you for that. Superman Shrey, is there a question? No? Did I hear something? Oh, yes, Vivek.
Maybe somebody can comment, like, we talked a lot about the business recovery streams. That's what I talked about, and I think what we talked about. But I think there still is a cyber dimension to the recovery stream. If someone's going to talk to that, that would be great.
Absolutely. Superman Shrey, it's over to you. Do you need to prop up your screen as well?
Yes, please.
All right, I grant you the powers to do so, and watch me fail while I grant you these powers. It should happen any moment now, but you can start. Anand, this is the moment you're waiting for. And of course, I failed at doing it. I brought up the wrong screen. But while I bring up the screen, you can go ahead, Shrey, and you can begin the conversation.
All right. Thank you, firstly, Vivek, for bringing the conversation back to the technical perspective. Now, at the end of day 4, we have received the first batch of confirmed results from the forensics analysis. Forensics was a high topic of discussions. Many people were requesting what the results are from forensics department, and here we are. The key finding is unauthorized firmware modifications have been confirmed across 127 devices in production.
Can you say that again, Shrey?
127 point of sale devices have been confirmed to have unauthorized firmware modifications. These were not surface level software infections. They were firmware level changes. The attackers went beneath the operating system, embedding modified code directly into the POS hardware itself. When we compared the hashes of these devices against the manufacturer's baseline, the story was completely different. Further analysis revealed that the distribution vector was our managed service provider. The MSP, we have been working hand in hand with them. They still confirm that it is none of their employees who've been doing it, or maybe not, but still we'll see on that angle. Their firmware update infrastructure was compromised, allowing attackers to push malicious updates that were digitally signed with legitimate certificates. That means they did have access towards inside information. In other words, they used trust against us, which is the key element, turning our supply chain into their weapon. As of this report, I can confirm all 127 affected devices have been quarantined and isolated from the network. None of them are alive on it right now. As we are slowly, steadily progressing towards full recovery, we are making sure that every single device in production is in fact clear of any malicious software, no matter what. We are going steadily, slowly, yes. There are some failures that we are encountering in the ERP recoveries, but we'll keep you posted.
Shrey, could you scroll down? Oh, I need your mic on, Captain.
Did you say that the MSP was unaware that they were fully owned and that they were an unaware participant in the supply chain attack?
Alex, you want to take this one?
How much did they know is my question.
That has been their stance all throughout this, and it's been pretty frustrating dealing with our third-party partner where they're saying all our dashboards are green. That said, the IR team did start pulling on some threads, and one of the users that we believe was used to trigger the firmware updates across our POS fleet, we asked them, it's like, hey, can you pull up some logs? So we have worked with them. Unfortunately, they don't use a SIM, so we had to use Windows Event Viewer, which is the worst thing you can deal with. So we did start scrolling through Windows Event Viewer, and after days, after hours of scrolling through that, we did see that user account did have a password reset. And MFA was disabled to onboard. So I said, hey guys, you might want to Google scattered spiders TTPs, and we forwarded off some stuff that we got from our threat intel provider. So they're still having a little bit of a coming to Jesus moment on this situation. It is a bit above their expertise to understand what these types of attacks are, but I am suspicious that we were compromised by a VPN that we did not have the proper surveillance or access control capabilities on. So we'll work with them, but I think when the after all this, I think we need to review that contract.
All right, please go ahead.
I'm curious about where you've isolated the POS systems from the network. How is that related to the outages in inventory and ERP? Was it a lateral transition, or do we know anything about how those systems were affected?
We don't have the visibility per se between point of sales and those systems. We sort of like flat networks, I'll be honest with you. However, jumping on what we could see, we do have some tooling. It does look like the same user account was used on that. They do like it. Let me just look that one up. Admin. That's the account, admin.
Oh, great. Clearly, this
password,
POS
this
came with a user's manual. Fantastic.
Do you know what POS actually stands for?
Here we go. Ask Alex after the event. All right. Anand, as you can see, my team has got some very, very bright minds at the table, and we work with amazing third parties because in Module 2, our CEO said we have unwavering trust in our third-party vendors. Please fire away your questions.
So this almost seems like a classic supply chain attack, obviously pun intended here, with where you guys are at. Obviously, I heard in previous modules somebody said zero trust. Well, obviously that's saying, what it is. But in terms of just the surface area of your attack, right? Now that you've identified that the POS through your third-party managed service provider was the point of entry, how do you ensure there are no other points of entries for not just from a supply chain management perspective, but from any other attack vectors perspective, one. Secondly, with zero trust, and you've talked about VPN and lateral entries, you have all of the data that you have right now with the VPN solutions that you have. Have you been able to firstly ensure that this user and this credentials obviously nuked now and they don't have access anymore going forward? And are you looking for specific patterns right now with any other possible compromised users? And third, this is something every one of us in any large organization's been really named and shamed when you click on that link when the CEO is asking for an Amazon gift voucher, and nobody really likes being called out. But this is really not that time to have your employees fearful of being called out. So have you sent out communications internally to ensure employees are on the lookout and there is no culture of blame right now?
Go ahead.
I will speak to the technical pieces and pass it to communications in terms of what we are doing. So how do we know the door is closed? Well, right now we do have, we've turned off the VPNs where we believe the attack vector came in. Again, they manage and deploy our POS systems. They do it over that VPN. They have a management server on their side, some equipment on our side. We've isolated that. Now, that also does bring up a challenge that, well, how do we restart the business if there's any reliance on those systems on the other side of the VPN, particularly with an MSP that's, core strength is managing point of sales and not necessarily network security. So we do have to figure out, can we run in a degraded state, and what state that is? What can the business actually do if we are not going to reconnect? So that's some discussion to be had. I think we do want to get those stores open. There's a whole non-technical piece to that. On the second piece, the patterns, we want to do some threat hunting, start looking at our own directory service. We can do some aggressive, if we're concerned that there's more credentials compromised, we don't believe necessarily that our directory service was compromised. We believe it was the MSPs, and they just used their credentials on their management server to get into our environment. That said, we do need to keep our eyes open, and we'll be doing this like during this module, but also probably weeks until we're very confident that the environment is fully clear.
Hugh, we brought you out of retirement back into this. For those of you that don't know, Hugh is the retired CISO at Thompson Rivers. So we did quite literally bring you out of retirement for this. Is what Alex saying at this point, given the extent of this attack, inviting any confidence in you, or are there still any more holes?
Well, I think you've hit on the key issue, and that is there's one group in your company you do not want to lose trust with, and that's your board. So what I noted over this session was that the board had approved cyber insurance purchase and have found out during this incident that there is no cyber insurance available. Immediately makes me wonder, well, you've also claimed PCI compliance. You've claimed that you have a robust and mature digital transformation plan that obviously...
That's him. He's been awfully quiet, so you're on the hot seat next, my friend.
Hasn't proven itself. We have overstated things like membership in our plans. So there are a number of things that the board needs to be very concerned about. This incident will have a very long tail and a very expensive long tail. When we wrap up here today, the losses will continue to pile up for months, if not years. It will be a serious problem. We're going into a financial statement period that isn't looking pretty bleak now. So if I had one piece of advice for anyone out in the audience who gets the chance to sit in front of the board, make sure you tell the truth, you're transparent, that you don't hide anything. The board can't help you if you leave us in the dark.
All right. The board has asked you to step out of the dark, Hanif, and there are a lot of questions here, so I'll give the floor to you.
Okay, I'll officially start with my title as advisor. So
yes, digital transformation advisor.
I think that's critical in this. And the one thing I'll advise the company on is that an IT failure and a transformation shouldn't be blended as one when the MSP is involved. And so we have to just be really careful about painting the brush right across all of these projects and all of the IT staff and the MSP and really look at what we know, what the truth is, and then making sure that we understand where the root of this issue is and whether it is truly related to the digital transformation or if it's completely independent. Sure, the digital transformation has had problems, but if you get into a car accident, it doesn't mean that you're a bad driver if you were hit by somebody else. And I think that we have to just keep that in perspective.
Fair enough. Operations.
I would agree, but maybe slightly counter given some of the nature of some of the systemic decisions that have led us to the point that we're in, whether that being by the executive group or by the board.
I don't know if this is the time to air dirty laundry, but the security team was pretty frustrated by the checkbox vendor risk management that we were doing with our MSP partner. They first filled it out with yes and smiley faces. We did push back on that, but then we were told to step down because it was going to inhibit the velocity of the project. So this is something to take into consideration that, in the future, when we are doing these digital transformation projects and finding strategic partners, we want to make sure that we are not taking on additional risk working with them. And it seems that this might be the case with our partner.
Fair enough. Leah, from a risk perspective, you're hearing all of these critical elements that are part of our recovery. I'm sure it is causing some concern as well. I really want to get your perspective right now because there's a few questions that have come in online. The whodunit question is coming up quite a bit. So Shrey and Alex, be prepared for that. Lee, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Just echoing what Alex just said, we need post-incidence reassessments and looking into how did we assess this vendor. We have been mitigating all along, in the last 4 days, we've been mitigating the risk that we realized, but we're not alone in this. Now that we've done our root cause analysis, we have, by some degree of certainty, we can say that, we know where it came from. So we're accountable for that risk because we had to do our due diligence and check everything that needed to be checked prior to this and not allow an accelerated project to inhibit our security controls that we want to be put in place. But right now, we have a bit of that risk that needs to be transferred. We cannot mitigate everything and we cannot accept everything. So the residual risk that needs to go to the vendor all those conversations need to basically get started now. Once we have this conversation with our board, who's not happy with us, and we present that dollar amount to them, we need to have at least a preliminary idea of what is the amount that can be transferred to this vendor. So my suggestion is to start the reassessment process early on and make sure that, we're looking at root causes, everything that went wrong in terms of the controls that we were expecting in the SLA. And once that assessment is done or the reassessment is done, then come back with some suggestions for the next steps and how we can translate into this into dollar amount with vendors' obligation.
Fair enough. Sorry, I'm going to come to you Sony, rather. I'm going to come to you with a question that has come in online. This question comes from Eric Hansen, and given your focus on supply chain security in this instance, the question is, if we have malicious code on the POS or PIN terminals, this goes beyond the MSP. Square, issuing bank, will want to know about the active exploit. Your thoughts on this at this point?
So he's talking about the code that's residing on, the malicious code that's residing on the point of sale systems.
Potentially, yeah.
Right? Well, look, from a supply chain perspective, what would I do? What would I recommend? I mean, I got to rely on the forensic investigators to give me more information about what that malicious code did. In terms of recovery, that malicious code better not be in our environment, right? We need those assurances from the forensic investigators that we brought on to give those assurances that that code is not on that system itself. More than that, though, I mean, I don't really know what else I would do. I just need those assurances, and then that system, that point of sale system that's now going to go live and be restored and operational, I would want to reach out to the vendors, actually. Hold on, not the MSP. I would want to reach out to all the vendors that we partner with now that we're in recovery. I'm talking about from the point of sale to the ERP to all these systems that kind of mesh together to work, to get their help and assistance in making sure that the environment is ready to go live. So
Fair enough. Yeah, thank you. Anand, go ahead.
That makes sense, but this is just one example, right? The code base being in the POS system is what happened today. I think the larger picture is, the POS systems today, tomorrow you could have an AI chatbot that's going rogue and that's going to start selling groceries at $1 to your end users, right? So it almost goes back to the question of how are you identifying and verifying legitimate components in your entire infrastructure. Doing a simple username, password combinations, including for the POS system, is not going to scale. Right? You'll have to start looking at things that are more identity-based, so you have more control over who the identity of that element is that's making questions, that's asking, that has control into your infrastructure, right? So one feedback would be think beyond just username passwords and think about identity-based policy making. So this way, the moment there is a deviation from what is expected from a behavior, right? If you suddenly start seeing the POS system connect back to a command and control botnet, that's suspicious, right? You don't want that happening anyway, independent of which device it is, independent of which location it's at. So being able to build identity-based policy making would be really critical to ensure that doesn't happen again.
Sunny, and then Vivek, go ahead.
May I? So, absolutely. And that goes to me beyond just this one isolated thing with looking at the code within that point of sale. It's more about what is our cybersecurity program, right? Like exposure management to me is coming to mind. We need to really look at what are our security controls, both from a preventative perspective and a detection perspective. So, and that should cover, as we're doing threat hunting and other aspects of ways in for attackers, we want to be able to threat model all that and then build security controls around those deficiencies, or at least to be able to, at the very least, detect them.
Vivek, Sonny, if I can ask you to mute as well. Thank
sorry.
you.
There were a lot of failures here. It clearly isn't one thing that created this massive blast radius, and I think it's vital we're thinking about how to prevent a repeat of this, not exactly in another firmware incident, but it could be anything. So, let's just take a look at the failures here, because it's a lot to swallow. First of all, there's an overall risk management failure. Like the amount of change the organization signed off on exceeds the risk appetite. There's no way this velocity and volume of change should have happened the way it happened, exceeds the risk appetite. So that's failure number one, sorry, Chris. And then failure number two, from an operational risk perspective, how could they do this to the entire fleet at once? Like, I know someone mentioned a pre-production environment, maybe that was done, but even if that had been done, I know we're talking old school when we talk about stores and data centers, but even in a modern cloud context, you might only do it in one region, right, of your multi-region universe. So I think that was another failure. I think the third failure was supply chain risk. So not only the contractual controls with the MSP, but with the software provider, there's been some good lessons learned when you think about what SolarWinds has done. They basically developed dual pipelines for their source code, compile it separately, and review it independently. Probably a retailer's not going to do that. But when you think about this, wasn't just a software that ran in a browser. This is firmware going in the hardware. And that should have a higher level of due diligence around it, because people can't troubleshoot it as easily. People shouldn't be able to touch it as easily. So I think there are 4 massive failures that have to be taken back into the organization, worked back into the technology change framework and enterprise risk program, so that, again, when the next thing comes, it's not able to accelerate through, because that's just gonna, the organization is just set up, if it allows this kind of pace of change, unchecked, unfettered, without these controls, they're just gonna be setting themselves up again for the next one.
Thank you, Vivek. That's why we have you here and pay you in kind big dollars. If it was left to us, it would be rock, paper, scissors, and let's figure this out. But these are all very, very important and valid points. I don't know if I missed anybody else. Oh, CFO. Uh-oh.
I got to chime in. I agree with everything that's been said, but our path forwards is clear. We are held to PCI, SOX, and CSOX standards that we're clearly not compliant to. Like the basic account mitigations, the lower-level environments, the segregation of duties, those are all built into those frameworks, and we are telling the public that we are compliant to those. So that's job one, is that we have our cyber insurance audit, our CSOX audit, our PCI audits. How did we ever pass them? Like, let's start with pulling those skeletons out of the closet and ensuring compliance with those frameworks. Like that should help prioritize our investment in mitigating this stuff, from my perspective.
If engineering, go ahead.
Yeah, whenever there's an error that's been made, and I'm from engineering, so I get to see the world in black and white, there has been an error. There's really only 2 things that are useful to do. There's a lot of useless things like blame storming and other games you can play. But really, you can just focus on mitigating what the error caused. And then the second is what my CFO friend was talking about, which is doing what you can to prevent the error from happening again. And so from that standpoint, I think that's moving out of recovery and into preventative nature. But I think we can start to do some of that work already as part of recovery to make sure that nothing else is going to happen even through the recovery phase.
Lena, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to touch on something that you mentioned about cyber insurance, and I don't know, has cyber insurance already said, no, we're not paying that, because you said you have something in place and it isn't in place? Because I can tell you that's what's going to happen. Because as soon as just ask the city of Hamilton how that worked out for them.
They're going to go back to the questionnaire you filled out for the policy.
Yeah.
They're going to say you attested that you had control. You don't, then we
And
don't
you
pay.
don't, and we're not paying, and Hamilton was on the hook for $18 million because they said they had MFA across, sort of
But
multiple
I suspect
levels.
our exposure is larger because we have the
100%.
same deficiencies potentially in our financial controls
Yeah,
and our PCI compliance. And so we're subject to all sorts of exposure.
Two types of insurance that are at play here. There's operational insurance, right? So your business is down, can you claim on that? And then there's cyber insurance. And on the cyber insurance, because I've seen those questionnaires go from 1 page to 23 pages, we have to actually think, is there something on the questionnaire that this carefully crafted scenario would have tripped up on? Because it was not an MFA failure. Like the MSP got hacked and the code was slipped into our supply. I don't think there is actually a question on the questionnaire that would put this at risk. Go ahead.
That was going to be my comment. Is I think this is sort of a fundamental.
So you're copying me.
It's a fundamental lack of proper engineering of the environment and scope creep, right? Like Alex commented, we're good with flat VLANs here. Like that's almost central to the issue of how this was able to transit. And also I commented very early on about whether or not an MSP should have patching on a POS as a part of their scope, especially if they're not security minded. Now, granted, I guess they're the provider that is recommended by the vendor, so they have some experience with this, but I think the fact that someone was able to make a lateral transition based on that attack vector is very, very problematic, and then able to get into other more important parts of the infrastructure. And we were not testing our backups. Like there was multiple IT failures here.
Behind. All right, go ahead, unmute and ask away.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, is there a looming liability for the organization for not having reported the MSP as being compromised and therefore all of their potential clients being compromised as well? Because if they knew and didn't do anything about it, they would be liable for all of the other compromises that organization would be facing too. Just to add to the CFO's.
No, great. If I can ask you to mute the excellent question. Folks, by the end of this, I think we're all going to be unemployed, but whoever wants to answer that question, operations, go ahead.
From my perspective, I don't think so, because there was active communication with the MSP. Like they were very well aware of the circumstances that we were in, and their responses is we see no issue. So I don't think there's any liability on our part of there not being that information shared. I think they're potentially in very hot water, because the nature of this threat seemed very targeted, but also sort of persistence opportunity, because like the fact that they went after a POC and pre-constructed a financial motive around this, and it wasn't as if they just sort of they just trashed whatever system they could get a hold of. It was targeted towards a firmware for a POS system. That is not just sort of a run-of-the-mill, we deployed the wrong patch. So it was very targeted, which has to assume they're targeting other organizations that MSP is looking after as well, in different frameworks probably.
Maybe just to add to that Scatter Spider does sort of have a seasonal choice of industry, right? And this spring it was retail. Marks and Spencer's and Harrods in London. both got hit by them. And, you know, if you look at like, well, how do they operate? And it's pretty impressive considering arguably some of them are teenagers. They get a very good understanding of how help desks work, and they have an exceptional understanding of how Active Directory authentication works, and are able to then reset credentials and then get into an environment. In this case, they got into the environment, explored around, and said, hey, there's a management console, and then saw, oh, these are the customers. And you know, for last week's headline of cyber in British Columbia, we had an airport attack. And like, I looked at the headline, I did not read it, and I said, that's a supply chain attack. You don't need to read it, because if there's 3 airports that are physically disparate, but the same attack vector, it's because it was a third party that got popped and let them into the airport. And we saw it with 3 airports last week. So those are some commonalities that, you know, back to the question, is the are we liable? No, we are a consumer of that product. We did raise the flag. We you know, even tried to, you know, work with them to try to solve this problem, because we were blind to it at the time. I think they've got some pain points ahead of them with likely us suing them, and then any other impacted party. But yeah, you know, at the end of the day, you know, organizations like that specialize in point of sales, they specialize in point of sales, absolutely. They might not specialize in all the other things that we care about. And since, you know, they may see their business model as only making sure the POS works and not necessarily the resiliency of how they do that. And that's where, you know, we see a lot of supply chain attacks. You know, like, we got good firewalls now. Most corporations do, so it's a hard shell. So you're either phishing people in on the inside, or you're trying to find a trusted partner on the outside with a conduit directly into the core of the business.
I think there's one scenario where, Peter, you're onto something. You know, the MSP has an onus to tell its own customers. But I think you'll sometimes find when an MSP has a large customer that's been impacted, that customer may have unreasonable influence on what the MSP does, and influence on how much disclosure they do. And I think this is actually like a really powerful lesson about information sharing and disclosure, because a lot of cyber leaders struggle with their chief legal officers, for example, to get the information shared out, to get it disclosed. And in the case of an MSP, it may even be, you know, the large customer could pressure the MSP to kind of hold off. Sometimes law enforcement will also direct them to hold off, because legitimately it's an investigation. But I think there is a scenario where, you know, the company could be, you know, implicated if they were, you know, pushing the MSP to do that. But again, the MSP, like the CISO, needs to be honest with their customers. Yep. And, you know, they have to basically make that call to do the right thing, no matter what impacts that's going to have on their financials, future business, because it's a bigger brand and trust thing at issue. But I think that's the only, I think, one scenario where you could get implicated. And we saw, if you map that back to the CISO role, that kind of plays out for a couple of CISOs that have actually been indicted, you know, where they made that call to not disclose. So it's important, whether it's directly for the organization or indirectly through a third party, where you have a large relationship with, that you're not holding back that sharing, doing the right level of anonymization, and, you know, putting it into the right vehicles, whether it's law enforcement, CCCS, CCTX, you know, the ISACs. I think it's vital for us to get those things out there. That's how I think a lot of the scattered spider IOCs got shared, because when it hit retail, then they pivoted to insurance, then they pivoted to airlines. All 3 of those verticals had the IOCs. Now, not all of them were actively consuming them, but I bet you they are today.
Okay, we have a comment from Lena, then we have about 4 minutes. So Lena,
Okay,
go ahead.
I was just going to add to this. At the end of the day, just to remember, with something, with the group like Scattered Spider, they're not doing it, they're not using fancy tech, they're not, it is at its I want to underline that it is a social engineering attack, and what they are doing is they are targeting help desks, usually late at night, after hours, on weekends, which we all know statistically that's when you're going to get hit. And the problem is that is who they are targeting. So when you talk about, and then this is just my happy place, is that human firewall, the importance of training your teams, of training them to understand what help desk does and doesn't do, to understand what social engineering is. You can't. This is literally, if we could have people understand what social engineering is, you could probably eliminate a huge chunk of some of the breaches that are happening. And it does happen with Scattered Spider frequently.
You know, I'll add to that like there's a challenge with the help desk. You know, certainly there's probably been some memos around the help desk. But then we have to balance the usability versus security, because the first thing people said was like, well, clearly you don't reset admin accounts. Right, and you know, that's the obvious thing to do, but well, that's business inhibiting, because now your admins can't do work. So it is much more nuanced than just saying like, all right, if somebody calls up and starts guessing, or like they're starting to fire on bad questions, you know, hang up on them. But it's more so nuanced to like recognize, you know, what's the context of this user? Are they on holiday? Because generally it's somebody that's on leave or whatnot. But yeah, as soon as that account has administrator privileges, which the help desk might not even know, right? Like,
and they probably won't. And absolutely, you're right. It isn't black and white. But that's my whole point: is you can't have black and white rules in a world that's so gray.
The help desk needs help, heard loud and clear. Sabina, very quickly, and then we have a closing email to look at, and then we'll go for a short break for 7 to 8 minutes, and then come to lessons learned. Go ahead.
Okay, this goes to the board. Does an incident of this size make you pause on culture? Because every company that's ever been robbed has been compliant. So that's a terrible goal to have. Let's be compliant and not get robbed. So does that mean that checking the box can no longer be the way we do business? Because look what happened when we did. Do we have to have a goal beyond the minimum viable checkbox? Do we have to shoot for trust or safety or some other larger emotional construct that resonates with the market, our investors, and the customer? Or do we say, well, this is just what happens when you run a computer business? You know, these things will happen, and we're an 80-year-old company, we have our values, and we got this far this way, we're going to get 80 more years the next. And then you have to have these types of conversations as to, what do you think we're doing here? You know, what value do you think we're growing or defending? Like, does this become that conversation at the offsite next quarter?
If you can keep it at 30 seconds.
The board will have a long and thoughtful discussion on this topic. We will get back to you.
Fair enough, fair enough. Thank you so much. I know there's a lot of more other questions. Anand, if I can give you the floor for 30 seconds as well. Anything that you want to add at this point?
Maybe a follow-up to that question, which is, it's almost really not a question of whether someone's going to get hacked or breached or compromised. It's almost what we do once that happens, the systems that we have, the processes, the people and policies that we have. So I think focusing mostly on this as an isolated incident is really not going to do justice for the bigger picture. And as an external advisor to the board, please don't be frugal with your IT spend and engineering spend. Give them all the tools and better partners.
All right. Well, as I bring this very close to a conclusion, I will say that I'm not going to read it verbatim, but I will say finance. I know you've been sitting there quietly and contemplating the meaning of life as we deal with this situation, but there is a lot of pressure right now on you as well to confirm that what are we going to do? Are we going to adjust our earnings and forecast and forward-looking statements before filing the calling brief for all our analysts? As it stands, the materials still reflect our pre-incident projections. There's a lot of nervousness at this point. Your thoughts?
I mean, we can still go forwards with the past period reporting, but given the materiality of this event, we have to withdraw full year guidance. Yep. And we'll work with legal and communications and investor relations to draft a message to effectively say, over the coming months and years, we will evaluate this and update guidance as we feel appropriate, but it's too early to say. So we will not be providing new guidance, but we will withdrawing our existing guidance.
Your Director of Investor Relations says, perhaps we should, and I'll read this verbatim, issue a revised forecast or a statement of uncertain impact pending investigation. The latter. Thank you very much. And of
So
course,
asterisks.
what was that?
So asterisks.
Asterisks, pretty much. Well, with that, I can say that for the recovery phase, there are many other things that we also have to look at besides the tech. I know, Alex, you brought up the question about food and the movement of services, so on and so forth. So there's a lot of other areas to unpack as well. But for me, what's more important besides all of that is our CEO just tweeted, and our CEO said something, "From the ashes of error, we rise and recover." Somebody please take away the CEO's phone and don't allow her to tweet anymore. I will ask everyone, firstly, not only do I want to thank everyone, Cloud for Opta and all the advisors, for participating in this recovery module. The time right now is 3:55, and I promise you at 4:10 we will begin our final short session on lessons learned, with the caveat that the way we want to do this is with all of you that are here. I want you for the next 10 minutes or so to think about what were some gaps? What didn't we talk about? Because this will inform the journey of Operation Defend the North into Toronto, and then we will conclude, myself and Alex, into what you can expect in 2026 with the different breakouts and the different engagements we're looking to do in this exercise. So everyone, please take 15 minutes exactly, and please come back to join us for the final 30 minutes where we want to hear from all of you. What did we miss, and what can we do to deal with this situation a lot more better and with a lot more intensity above and beyond what we already did? Thank you all for joining us. See you in 15.